Hey, soccer fans, this is Nick with the Feed the Fire podcast. So happy to be back talking Major League Soccer and talking the Chicago Fire with you all. It has been a few weeks since I released the last episode. A lot going on, not behind the mic, because that's where I'm at right now, but just a lot going on, let's say, with work and with family and with life. As some of you may know, there's been a bit of a shakeup at my office. I've stepped into a much greater role, taking on some management responsibilities. And part and parcel with that was being sent to our global headquarters last week in London to meet with internal executives, to meet with clients, to collaborate, to build momentum, to strategize, to see how we can continue to rebuild my branch, as well as to continue to grow our global operations. And man, it was a great time. I didn't have time to take in any of the soccer sites or the football sites. We actually were hosted by the insurance market. The Lloyd Syndicates put on a rugby sevens tournament, so we got to go that for the day. That was my sports for the week while I was in London. But it was really interesting that I got to meet a new executive with our office, and he's like, "Oh, you follow soccer in the United States? Do you know this guy who plays for Philly, Jack, some center back?" I was like, "Yeah, I think I know who you're talking about. You mean Jack Elliott?" He's like, "Yeah, Jack Elliott. I knew him from, we were mates in schoolyard days back in the day, whatever." And I said, "Oh, yeah, he just signed with Chicago as a free agent. So I get to watch him every weekend now at my home stadium." And he was like, "That's amazing. I'm so glad to hear Jack is still playing." So it was funny that even in London at a rugby tournament with insurance professionals, we were able to make a Chicago Fire connection there. So, Jack, if you ever you listen to this, like, let's connect, let's reach out and talk to your old schoolyard buddy who I get to work with now. But it was a great experience. It was a great time. And oh my gosh, it was a great time also for the Chicago Fire, who have now won three straight across all competitions. And in the regular season, now have a 4 game point streak. Let's go back and talk about this. And just so you all know, kind of a programming update, since it has been a couple weeks since my last episode, today we're going to recap the matches, maybe look a little bit ahead to the New England US Open Cup match that's going to go on tonight. But also, then later this week, I'd like to do a bit of a news catch up and just talk about some of the headlines from around Major League Soccer and the Chicago Fire, and then just kind of do a catch up of that, and then preview their next league match, which is scheduled for May 25th at New York City. The road trip continues for the Fire. So, since the Fire had that just absolute disaster, as Berhalter called it, in Nashville, where they lost 7-2, where they were down 7-0 before they scored, down 5-0 at the half, the Fire have responded as follows. At home, drawing Orlando City 0-0, a hot Atlanta or Orlando City team right now, by the way. They draw Orlando City 0-0. They beat Detroit in US Open Cup 4-0. They defeat Atlanta at home 2-1, and then they go on the road to Charlotte, who has given up 3 home goals all year, and the Chicago Fire hang 4 on them, including a penalty kick from Brian Gutierrez, who had man of the match and team of the week performances, MLS team of the week performances, along with Andrew Gutman, who was named to the MLS team of the week. So a good week for the Chicago Fire, a good month of May for the Fire so far. So the Chicago Fire in their match against Orlando, obviously the key play here was Chris Brady's 36-minute red card when he comes out of the box, does a little bit of a jump kick. Again, this is one of those where the defensive line and the keeper still need to gel, figure out who's going to be responsible. Is the defender going to be able to track back and recover? Does Brady trust his defenders to do that? Or is Brady trying to be more aggressive and just having to learn when he can come off his line, come out of the box and try to make a play? Well, in this case, he made it look like the wrong decision. Even if the decision to come out of the box was right, he ended up giving a jump kick to the Orlando player outside of the box, ended up getting sent off. So Jeff Gall gets his first minutes with the Chicago Fire in MLS play, and then the following week against Atlanta gets the first start in place of the suspended Chris Brady. But as hot as Orlando has been, the Chicago Fire were able to hold them to a 0-0 draw. Now, it's disappointing because they end up losing the points when they probably at full strength could have won that match and taken 3 points, which would have been huge for the Fire. But let's take a look at that match, and then we'll get John Donovan's take on it as well. So the Fire ended up with 46% possession, 17 shots, 8 on goal. So still a decent offensive output there. And they had opportunities to find the back of the net. Let's see if I can find the XG real quick here. Yeah, they ended up with 2.6 expected goals. So not a bad offensive output for the Chicago Fire. 426 total passes, 83% passing accuracy, 7 corners, 2 crosses, 2 offside, winning 10 aerial duels to Orlando City's 5. The keepers were credited with 2 saves. The defense ended up with 13 clearances, 16 fouls, 3 yellows, and a straight red to Chris Brady. So that's the statistical breakdown of that match. And the Fire really dominated up until Chris Brady's red card, and they had to kind of change their shape and kind of change the way they wanted to play. They had to be a lot more picky with how they wanted to attack and push forward. They had to play a little bit more defensive. You saw also Gutierrez pick up a yellow card in the 45th minute, and Gutman pick up a yellow card in the 70th, so they had to be very, very careful. We saw an earlier than possibly usual sub with Glasgow coming in for Jonathan Dean in the 60th. Jonathan Bamba was pulled off in the 40th minute in order to bring Jeff Gall in because of Brady's red card. So you saw them have to really kind of shift around. Now, a lot of people in this match were talking about how Gutierrez should have been subbed off, that he was the one who had the worst performance from the eye test. But those who were looking statistically at the foot mob scores saw that Jonathan Bamba was actually scoring worse than anyone at that time, or ended up with the worst score. Now, obviously, he probably would have improved that score had he played the full 90. But this was something that Berhalter saw, that Bamba was not having the impact on the game to that point, and ended up bringing him off. Now, I disagreed with it in the moment. I'm not sure who would I wanted to pull off. If I would have wanted to pull off Guti or Bamba, or at that point pull off Kuipers and just see if Zinkernagel and Bamba can make something happen from the wings. I probably not going to want to pull off Kuipers as your top striker, Golden Boot chaser here. But do you want to pull a defensive midfield off and bring in another defender, switch to 3 in the back? There's a lot of options that Berhalter could have gone with. Now, when I saw him pull off Bamba, I said, okay, maybe I don't like it in the moment, because we know Bamba can impact games late. We have seen him come away with near winners against Miami, as well as those late game runs that he can make, and he's fully fit. So this could have been a minutes thing, that, hey, let's keep Bamba fresh and see if he can come out in a congested schedule where they've got U.S. Open Cup match against Detroit, which they assume they're going to win. Then they have an Open Cup match the following week. They're on this 5-game road trip. So these are things that probably all went through Berhalter's head. So while I disagreed with him in the moment, I guess you can't disagree with the long-term plan. And hey, the results have shown up. Gutierrez has improved. He's had an excellent run of form since this match, and Bamba has been fresh, and the Fire have been winning matches. So you can't argue with that. Now, let's get John Donovan's take on this Orlando City matchup, and we can then move on to cover some of the other matches, as well as get John's thoughts on everything the Fire have been up to in the last couple of weeks. So, John, take it away.
John Donovan here talking about the MLS and the Chicago Fire. Nick, I consider myself somewhat of a soccer purist in a lot of ways, and that game Saturday night was really exciting. I was on the edge of my seat. The game represented probably the best opportunity I've seen for local Chicago kids to push themselves into the MLS, into the upper division of U.S. soccer. The midfield was very good this last game. They made some stupid mistakes like grabbing shirts, Oriel and Gutierrez did, especially in the offensive area. You don't want to make those crazy moves, maybe in defense, but not in the offensive area. But all 3 of those guys, Oriel, Pineda, and Gutierrez, they sucked up that loss, that 7-2 loss, and realized, hey, if I'm going to play soccer as a pro, I've got to put out. And they did put out. It really was a complete change from a complete terrible game, that 7-2. I couldn't figure out who played well on the field of that game. Where this game, there was a lot of guys that really performed well. I'm going to start with the midfield. Pineda, I believe he led the Southwest Conference, not the Southwest Conference, the conference with North Carolina in it. He led the conference in assists as a center mid. And, under that previous coach, whose last name began with a K, he had him all over the field. He was probably the only homegrown player that other coach respected on the field, that used regularly, but not in his position. Greg Baltar is a really good pro coach. We haven't had that kind of coaching in Chicago since Brady or Bradley. He looks at all of the team as potential players. Him starting Cups in this game was wonderful. A 16-year-old guy. Yeah, he did make some mistakes. The Orlando front line is very good. But he stood in there. He stood large. He played the game the way it should have been. I think Elliott helped him out quite a bit. But it was a game, Nick. I mean, when you're down, when Brady came out and kneed the guy in the chest, I mean, there's no doubt that was a red card. That was a red card, and they lucked out that ball was outside the area by about an inch and a half, or we could have lost this game. It just was an inspirational game all the way from the back with Cups playing in that midfield and the forward line, Nick. They had some opportunities. I think the Orlando goalie, who has 5 straight shutouts, just had a game and a half. Kuipers had some real serious shots. I mean, that forward line moves. In this game, they had some incredible shots. I think one went off the goalpost. It was a good game. Orlando was not a better team than the Fire. I don't know what happened to that 7-2 score. They're probably still in 12th or 13th place. I haven't checked it out yet. But the game, for me, was inspirational. All of those guys played well. If I had to pick out one guy, or well, maybe two on the floor that really did an exceptional job and showed great future, was Auriel for me and Kuipers. I mean, Kuipers was a maniac out there. He went at the game as if this was, well, it was the only game at the time, but really put out for the team. I'm very optimistic at the Chicago Fire. Yeah, there was nobody in the stadium. What do they expect after a 7-2 loss? You're going to go into the loop and have to, take 2 hours to get home? No. But after that game, I just was enthralled and enjoyed every second of it, Nick. I went up and told my wife. She said, "What was the score?" And I said 0-0, but it was a wonderful game. And she kind of looked at me like, "You're nuts." But, soccer is soccer, and I just enjoy the future now of this team. We're going to be developing local talent and using that talent for the betterment of our squad, like Philadelphia. A great example. So I don't know who they play next week. I haven't checked the schedule, but I'm looking forward to it. And I hope and pray that I hope our midfield stays intact. I know everybody's talking about De Bruyne, but we had such a bad experience with high-priced over or older DPs. I can't believe that we're going to do that. But, soccer's soccer, and when you have an owner that's a multi-billionaire, what's $12 million? Nothing. So we might see De Bruyne out there, but I would love to see that midfield stay intact. So we'll catch up next week, Nick. Hi, Mike. Great game. John Donovan here talking about the MLS and the Chicago Fire.
John, thank you so much for those comments about the Orlando City game. And yeah, absolutely, we're going to talk about in future episodes the Kevin De Bruyne talk, which has kind of calmed down a little bit, especially after his wife has been spotted in Italy looking for houses. But also, I agree with you. The midfield has been a theme of this point streak, of this win streak. And yeah, it'd be great to keep them together, John. But now we're hearing rumors about Brian Gutierrez being looked at by Roma in Serie A over in Italy. So we'll talk about all those headlines in a future episode later this week because we want to stick to the games on this one. But John, great commentary. Agree with everything you said. I especially agree with the sentiment of our wives looking at us like, why are you enjoying a 0-0 match so much? So I get that too. But fantastic. And the one other thing to build upon, as John said, as the Chicago Fire as an organization have said, is getting homegrown players to the first team, getting them into the MLS ranks and progressing them further if they need to. This match, you saw Chris Brady start in goal, Andrew Gutman, left back, Chris Cups, center back, who when we saw him in the Atlanta game, we were there live. I told my family, like, hey, that guy's 16. Like, what? There's no way that guy's 16. He's huge. Anyway, 16-year-old Chris Cups, Mauricio Pineda, Brian Gutierrez, and Sergio Orahel. 6 players started for the Chicago Fire that came up through their academy system. That is incredible. And these, and I said it, like, if you're gonna tout the fact that you've got these 6 guys playing, who cares? Like, anyone can put 6 homegrowns and 6 academy players on the field and get their butts kicked by the opposition. But given the fact that the Fire ended up with a 0-0 draw after an early red card against a team who's going on to be like the hottest team in MLS right now, and yeah, I got a little hindsight helping me out with this one, that is impressive by this Chicago Fire organization. All right, the Fire's next match was Wednesday, May 7th, U.S. Open Cup down in Bridgeview against Detroit City FC. Kudos to the Detroit fans. They made the trip down. They made themselves heard. They were there. Actually, during this time, I was hosting a client conference here at my office in the Chicago suburbs. And I said, oh, you guys are soccer fans? Let's go. I planned a little outing to the match. So I brought, 18 of my work colleagues and some client executives down for the match. They were impressed by how loud Detroit City fans were. They were impressed by the fight that the team put up. But as Alex Calabrese wrote at Men in Red 97, a professional win for the Chicago Fire to defeat a lower division team. Now, it was a cold day, and I think my company, my group, ended up buying out like half of the sweatshirts and hats that were there, the little knit caps. Nooks, is that what they're called overseas in England? I'll have to check in with my clients again to see what they called them. But I think they ended up buying about half of that stuff, the hoodies and the knit caps to stay warm. But it was a good game. And the goals kept us going. An early start with Kuipers scoring in the 4th minute. We had an own goal off a corner kick in the 35th minute. Glasgow kicks off the scoring in the second half with a 49th minute goal, and Haile Selassie adds one in the 70th minute. So Detroit City, on the one hand, we saw the Fire really be susceptible to long balls over the top against Nashville. So Detroit City was doing that a lot. But on the other hand, I've been watching Detroit City a 3 games this year so far, either Open Cup or USL if I can catch them. That's how their style has been. They like playing the long balls over the top. And it's very difficult to do that when you're playing against experienced players in the back line for Chicago. When you're playing against guys who are used to a much higher level, who could probably be reading this and probably, let's be honest, were ready for these long balls over the top, playing against a lower division team and coming off that 7-2 loss. So who did you have? You had Jack Elliott and Sam Rogers, 2 big dudes. You had Chris Brady in net because they knew he was fresh from that red card match, missing 60 minutes. He wasn't going to be playing on Saturday. So they had their first choice, essentially a first choice backline, Gutman, Elliott, Rogers, and then Amari Glasgow starting for the Fire. So this was a game the Fire should have won, should have dominated, and that's exactly what happened. So again, kudos for the Detroit fans for coming out. Glad you went home, taking the L with you. Not too many stats here on the MLS website because it was a U.S. Open Cup game, but it was one that the Fire should have won easily and one that they did. They were able to rotate their squad, bringing in, let's see, the stats here really aren't showing too many of the subs. Barlow gets in, relieves Kuipers, gives him a little bit of a break. So they were able to rotate some guys in as well. So in that U.S. Open Cup Now the Chicago Fire advance to the round of 16. They will be facing the New England Revolution at Chappie Field at Anderson Stadium, somewhere out in New England, I suppose, tonight, May 20th at 6:30 p.m. Central. So let's make sure we watch that match and see that the Fire hopefully will start a choice 11 there. They have gotten some results. They've gotten above the playoff line. Are they going to go for this win with the U.S. Open Cup? Also, we'll have to see what New England rolls out. We'll have to see if they're going to be serious about it. I really think that New England is going to take this cup seriously because looking at the standings, they're in the 11th spot right now. The Fire are in 9th. 2 points between them, I think. Let's see. Nope, only 1 point between them. So it's still very tight. Is New England going to want to worry about making the playoffs, or are they going to try and get this win while they can? The fact that it is so tight in the middle of the Eastern Conference, Miami is in 6th on 22 points. New England is in 11th with 18 points, 4-point gap between, these 6 teams here. Maybe you go for the Open Cup and then say, hey, if we end up, getting in the playoffs in the 6, 7, 8 spot, that's great. And we really make a run for the Open Cup. That could be great. There was also a really good article out on MLSsoccer.com about what the Open Cup means to Andrew Farrell as a player. Go check that out. Really good insight there. The next match that Chicago had was the Family Day match, a matinee, which was fantastic. We were able to go downtown for brunch with my wife and the kids. We had a nice brunch, drive around the city, got to Soldier Field, went in, played all the games, got all the swag, got our Sparky plush dolls that the kids absolutely loved. And it was funny, I heard some people griping that, oh, they changed it. It was for the first 5,000 people. And then they said it was the first 5,000 kids. Who cares, man? It's a plush doll. It's a Sparky plush doll. Are you really going to be griping over the little handouts, the door prizes, especially when they're like, this isn't like we're giving 20 of the cowboy hats to some dude or like someone sneaks in behind and grabs 5 of the baseball jerseys. The people handing these out were really giving them to the kids. Don't complain about that because you didn't get your Sparky plush doll, Mr. 20, 30, 40 something year old. Let the kids have it. My kids got theirs and they really did enjoy it. They're having fun with it. They're, I think my boys are actually playing soccer with the plush ball in the house since they've broken too many things with actual soccer balls in the house, but at least they're enjoying it. And it was fun. We all had a good time. We got to see some goals. We got to see a win. As my wife would remind you, she had been to now 3 Chicago Fire games before this Atlanta match, and they all ended 0-0 draws. So she was happy. She got to see goals. She got to see a win. We had a good family day. And then they took me from the stadium to the airport, and I departed for London. So it was a wild Saturday. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention Happy Mother's Day, since I was not able to put out an episode closer to that date. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers, the moms, the soccer moms, to everyone who has had their minivans and SUVs and mid-sizes and cars just completely dirtied and stunk up by cleats and balls and dirty clothes and everything between matches, who's had fast food wrappers and Gatorade bottles spilled. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. And my mom passed in December of 2021. But I will always remember her for many reasons, but especially as a soccer mom. She was a high school athletic coach. She did basketball and softball. And then when I started playing as a kid, she jumped on and was my assistant coach from AYSO through the U12 club levels. And she even helped out a little bit when I started playing for Northwest Indiana United when I was in high school. So I remember my mom as a coach, and she always came up with like the silliest ways to motivate. She would come up with like team chants and cheers, and she would get the parents to all put their hands up and make a tunnel after every game. So win, lose, or draw, we had the support of the parents, just goofy stuff like that. She'd come up with nicknames and end of season awards. And in the moment, I'm like, I just want to play the game. I just want to work on my game and be better and win. But it's so funny because now that I am managing a team of insurance adjusters at work, I'm doing the exact same thing. She's inspired me. I'm coming up with all these little ways to try and keep people feeling positive and motivated and moving forward. And it is absolutely inspired in part from having my mom, the cheerleader coach, there for so many years. So, Mom, I know you're still with me. Happy Mother's Day. Love and miss you. And again, happy Mother's Day to all the other moms out there. If you haven't picked up the phone and called your mom lately, do it. She's going to appreciate it. All right, back to the Chicago-Atlanta match. Sorry for a bit of a detour there. But in this game, the Chicago Fire, again, had a very, very good performance. Hugo Kuipers starts the scoring in the 14th minute with PK. Unfortunately, an own goal after that in the 80th minute brings Atlanta level, and you could see on the faces of the fans and feel it in the stands like, this is it. We're going to either draw or lose now. But where you didn't see that was on the team itself. And I think part of it is because it wasn't the worst own goal I've seen. Sam Rogers was having a pretty decent game up until this point. And I think what happens is he was reacting to the initial pass to try and head it out. But then it took a deflection off another defender. So he was completely wrong positioned body-wise and where he was facing for the redirected pass, the deflected cross in, and it hit him in the head and went in the net instead of him being able to kind of turn it away from the goal or turn it back toward the sideline. So a very unfortunate own goal. However, those seem to happen to the Fire more often than other clubs, at least. Maybe it's just the homer in me saying that. We'll have to see if on some of my other shows when I go make some guest appearances like we did for this Atlanta match. Got to go talk with Henry Aguita on Scarves and Spikes. Great Atlanta United show. They've got a great group of guys out there, journalists, fans, season ticket members. They do really good work. So if you want to get to know the Five Stripes, get to know Atlanta United a little bit more, go look up Scarves and Stripes, that podcast and that YouTube channel, and you'll get to know all of them. Also, they're really great to interact with on social media. So go find those guys on Twitter and X. Yeah. But fortunately for Chicago, they are able to continue playing the way they want to. Kwame gets the winner in the 86th minute. Something that I mentioned on that preview show with Scarves and Spikes, that the Fire, whether they're up, whether they're down, or whether it's level, they will continue to play the style that they have been coached in with Berhalter, and they will continue to push the ball up the wings. They will continue to build through the middle, whatever the opposition gives them. And that's exactly what the Fire did. And we're able to feel confident and know that that 86th minute goal was coming. And it absolutely did. Let's take a look at the quick stats, and then we'll hear from John Donovan as to his recap of the Atlanta match. Possession was about even, 50-50 in this one, but the Fire dominated the offense. 18 shots to Atlanta's 12, 8 shots on goal to Atlanta's 2, 523 total passes to Atlanta's 462 at a 78% accuracy rate. So this is a phenomenal possession and passing game by the Chicago Fire. Now, I will say Atlanta kind of let them do it, and maybe we should see some better passing numbers, but the fact is this was a phenomenal offensive game by the Fire. Just got to find the back of the net. They ended up with 9 corners. Everyone got the free hot dog. The Fire fed the Frank in like the first 35 minutes or so. 9 corners on the day, 6 crosses, 1 offside, out-dueled Atlanta in the air 18-9, and the Fire ended up with 2.9 XG. Gall was credited with 2 saves, and the Fire had 8 clearances, 10 fouls, and 2 yellow cards. So again, a very, very good game, kind of very back and forth game overall, but a very, very good game for the Fire. Even when Atlanta had their spells of possession, it didn't look like the Fire were going to break. There were a couple of times where maybe Atlanta was threatening, but a lot of it was Atlanta moving laterally, which is fine from a defensive perspective. In fact, the couple guys around my season ticket area in section 205, the one's going, "Hey, that's Miguel Almiron. He's back." Guy's like, "Almiron, who played for Newcastle?" He's like, "Yeah, that's Miguel Almiron." Guy's like, "He can't be Almiron. He's having a terrible day." So even he couldn't believe how down Atlanta had played in this match. So with that, and for a little bit more commentary on this match, let's kick it over to John Donovan. John, what are your thoughts on Atlanta?
John Donovan here talking about the MLS and the Chicago Fire. Nick, I am so pumped up about this Chicago Fire team. Number one, Greg Berhalter is such a improvement over what we've had for many years. He has an idea. He plays young guys. He specifically, I think they had 5 homegrown players on the field. 6, if you count Gutman in there. It is really a Chicago show. We went from a coach that did not respect Chicago players. He would play Pineda, and that was and Gutierrez from time to time. but he didn't develop any good players. And this is what you're seeing when you have a professional MLS coach. Berhalter is bringing it on, man. I just love the way you look at Gutierrez, Oriel, and Pineda. Those three guys, yeah, they Oriel did not play in that Nashville game. I don't know what was wrong, but this midfield is really ripping. I mean, Gutierrez seems to have learned that lesson in that Nashville game, and that's not going to happen again. And Oriel is a wonderful magician with the ball. His shot off his right foot going left after he had beat two players was a thing of beauty. I think we've got a classic center midfielder in the making in Oriel. He doesn't look like he's knocking it dead with his speed or anything. It's just his talent. And he does get it going. I really like our midfield. I think, between our midfield and our forwards, we have definitely a playoff squad. Hugo Kuipers is playing at a level right now that we haven't seen in Chicago in years. He is everything. I was listening to Berhalter after the game in an interview, and they said, well, how are you working with Kuipers? And he said, I haven't talked with him in 2 weeks. How do we improve his game? He's playing at the top. He's in shape. I think he went the whole 90. The guy is a beast on the field. It's incredible to watch him. And then you have two wing or forwards playing next to him, Bamba and Zinkernagel, who are good. I mean, this team is together. I'm going to break the rule here a little bit, and I am not one that's in favor of bringing in an older midfielder, specifically midfielder, because they run so darn much. De Bruyne, I've really enjoyed his play with Manchester City. My grandson adores him, probably one of his favorite players in the world, but we don't need another 34-year-old European coming in and taking Pineda's, Oriel, or Gutierrez's position. That's not the way we're going to develop good players in Chicago. And that brings me to another point. Back to Berhalter again. It's just like a wave of youth coming on the field. It reminds me of Philadelphia in the past couple of years, where we'd all be wondering, why aren't they signing big name players? They don't have the money that the Fire do. But it seems like Berhalter is mixing in these high price, very good Europeans with developing U.S. players. It is just really fun to watch. On that final score, it just looked like a mad dash to the goal. And I expected the Fire to win. In years past, I hate to say this, the management just offended me so much that I prayed that they lose so that we would get a good manager in. And I got to hand it to management. They kept changing, but it's almost like the Yankees in the years past. He'd fire a manager 2 or 3 times a year until he got to the good managing, and that's what's happened to the Fire. I honestly believe within a 5-year period, some point, Greg Berhalter will bring a cup to Chicago. He's just too much of a winner to go down in defeat like that Nashville game. In fact, the Nashville game might have been probably the best thing that have happened to the team this year. It showed them that they don't put out things could happen like that Nashville game. And I'm sure that guys like Gutierrez, who had a bad game, that Nashville game, came back swinging. They knew that this was their job. So, the two great players that played this game in my eyes were Oriel and Kuipers. They were just every place. When you look at guys on the bench, and you look at salaries and so forth, and you got to wonder about Kevin Acosta. Berhalter will just play the best guy that's playing in practice, and it doesn't matter what country you're from or anything. But Kevin Acosta, he hasn't played in a couple of games. He's healthy. I believe Berhalter's going in a different direction. So Kevin Acosta's had a great career. It's time for Chicago players to come on now. So the Fire plays 3 straight games on the road now. it's going to be tough, but they're definitely in the running for the playoffs, which is just music to my ears. Take care, Nick. Hi, Mike. Take care. Bye.
John, thanks so much for the insight into the Fire after that Atlanta match. Just to kind of continue the conversation a little bit on Kellen Acosta, yeah, you're right. We haven't seen him get as many minutes as perhaps last season or what we expected at the beginning of the season, but it looks like the Fire found something that works with that homegrown midfield of Pineda, Orahel, and Gutierrez. And we have seen Pineda be that kind of calming, stabling presence. I don't think he has much to grow for his game, or I don't think his game has much to grow or improve upon. Um, I'm not saying it couldn't be. I'm not saying he's perfect or an amazing player, but I just don't see, considering the fact he's been in the league, what now, 4 years, maybe 4 or 5 years with the Fire on the first team or something like that. I don't see him taking any more developmental steps. Maybe he does under Berhalter. Maybe there was some stagnation with the coaching. But you see Gutierrez is still improving. You see Orahel is still improving. So I think that midfield trio, the homegrown trio, is going to be excellent. But with this slate of games, I would absolutely expect to see Kellen Acosta coming in this Open Cup match against New England, maybe relieving Pineda of some duties. We know how thin that back line has been with injuries to Elliott, Turan, Rogers throughout the course of this season already. So maybe Berhalter decides to give Pineda a bit of a rest, bring Acosta in for this game, or rotate them and kind of split some minutes in the event they need to drop Pineda back to cover that center back position. It was nice, though, speaking of center backs, to see Carlos Turan in the stands, in the owner's box, the executive suite at the Detroit City game. I know a couple of the fans recognized him and started taking pictures with him at halftime. And as the mob grew, he politely excused himself and went back inside because he would have been quite busy there had he stayed in in view of the public. But he was smiling. He looked like he's going to be ready. So hopefully we hear some more about him out of training this week, and hopefully see him back in the MLS lineups very, very soon. So yes, absolutely, I'm with you, John. This midfield trio is doing what they need to do, but I expect some rotation as we approach a congested part of the Chicago Fire schedule. Now, the next match might have been the Chicago Fire's best performance of the entire season. A 4-1 victory at Charlotte, at a team that was expected to come in and contend for the top of the Eastern Conference, almost a lock to make the playoffs. They signed Wilfred Zaha. They had, Dean Smith had them firing on all cylinders from last season. This was a team to watch. This was a team who had not given up more than 3 goals at home the entire season. I'm not talking about in a match. I'm talking about the entire season. They had only given up 3 goals, and the Fire came into their place, dropped 4 on them, including a PK from Brian Gutierrez, one of his 2, plus he tallied an assist as well. So Gutierrez, phenomenal performance, a brace and an assist for him. But it was Joe Bamba, as everyone's calling him, Jonathan Bamba, who gets the scoring started in the 42nd minute on a great build-up play. And this is where you see that midfield trio really coming together, because it's Orahel who gets the turnover, feeds it to Guti in the center, who continues to move the ball from right to left to find Bamba on the wing. Bamba dekes the defender one-on-one, curls it beautifully. You saw Kalina cheating to the far post because he thought Bamba would be going for that far post curler. Bamba outplayed him. He outthought him, outsmarted him in this one, and ended up curling it near post. So Kalina was off balance, leaning the wrong way, couldn't even move to his right. He just kind of jumped straight up, and it was nothing but the back of the net for Bamba on that one. Fire continued their dominance into the second half, with Gutierrez scoring in the 60th minute and also converting a 79th minute PK. Zinkernagel added one in the 64th. Now, Charlotte did make the game interesting. They had their moments to attack and counterattack, but the defense recovered well. Patrick Agyemang had a goal in the 70th minute to pull the game within 3-1. You felt a little bit of momentum shift, and maybe Charlotte, if they got that second one, the Fire could collapse, the crowd would get into it, but alas, no. Then that penalty kick kind of sealed the deal for the Chicago Fire there. So an all-around great performance. Some nervy moments with the defense, but that's going to happen in any game in MLS, you're going to have a little bit of, it's going to go both ways, right? You're never going to completely shut down the other team, but the Fire came as close to doing that as possible in this match. Looking at the statistics, the Fire ended up with 47% possession, 25 shots, 10 shots on goal, and in defense, 9 block shots. The Fire, what an amazing offensive output here. They had an expected goal of 4.2. 4.2. So that means the shots they were taking had about a 20% chance. If you're only scoring, shots on goal, they would have had almost a 40% chance. So the Fire were getting some excellent scoring opportunities. Obviously, the penalty kick helps bump that number up a bit, but still an excellent offensive outing by the Chicago Fire. This is what blows my mind here. 514 passes at a 91% passing accuracy rate. This probably was the Chicago Fire's best performance, all-around performance, offensive performance, passing performance of the season. They ended up taking 6 corners, putting in 5 crosses, were called offside 3 times, which, hey, the way the offense was playing, I'm okay with that. 4.2 XG, Brady's credited with 4 saves. Defense had 11 clearances, 12 fouls, and 2 yellow cards. So an amazing output by the Fire. Let's take a look at this lineup just so we can see. Maybe we'll see what's going on with the New England game tonight. It was your just about choice starting 11, I would say. Brady and net, Gutman, Elliott, Rogers, and Dean along the back. I think my starting choice 11 would be Turan and Barroso, but otherwise we've got Pineda, Gutierrez, and Orahel in the middle, Bamba, Kuipers, and Zinkernagel up top. We saw some good rotations with Glasgow, Kwame, Barlow, Haile Selassie, and Davila all getting in the match. So hopefully the team is good to go for tonight's Open Cup matchup against the Revolution. John Donovan, what is your take on the Chicago Fire victory at Charlotte?
Nick, John Donovan here talking about the Chicago Fire and the MLS. Nick, this team is just really fascinating to me, the Chicago Fire. Number one, Nick, for years we've had way below average coaching. Today, or last Saturday night, we had 2 great coaches going against each other. Dean Smith, who's had a wonderful Premier League history as a manager, and Greg Berhalter, who really has developed into a very, very good coach. I mean, it was interesting to watch. Both teams went into a very tight formation, and it was almost like one betting on the other, see who could break their defenses. And neither team did it until Mr. Bambia put in a beautiful swinging insider against the grain of the goalie. The goalie was moving left where the ball looked to be going, and Bambia brought it back to the inside of the net. It was a beautiful strike. And what that did, it changed the whole game. Dean Smith knew he had to catch that goal and beat them, and they just didn't do it. It was the strangest game, Nick. I mean, I was cussing out Gutierrez. As you know, I'm not the biggest fan of Gutierrez. I like him playing in the MLS. I've heard rumors that Milan is after him. I wish him all the luck in the world, but I hope we have a return contract on him so we could get him back. But he missed a goal that was a wide open. There was probably 99% chance if he kicked the ball it would go in. And that 1% chance, he missed it. But he came back with a beautiful shot minutes later. So he filled it up for his mistake. It was a very nice game. He and his partners, all Chicago guys, Oriel and Pineda, played a beautiful game. I listened to the games in Spanish, Nick. And they were really up on Oriel. They said he'd been sitting for a year. They were confused why our old coach didn't use him. The guy's a skill monster. He's not going to overtake you on the field, but in the tight game, the guys together. I just got to say this. My grandson won the big Generation Adidas tournament out in Aurora. It was huge. And his age level is 2015. So His team won the. In fact, his team is the Chicago Fire, so they won the tournament and their age level. But back to the game, Gutierrez played a great game. I think Brady had an exceptional game. I mean, that timeout, he wasn't playing that well right up to that red card, and it might have spurred him back. And I think, honestly, the formation that Berhalter's using and not constantly changing it like we've had for the past couple of years, it's a solid 3-3-4 is what they're playing, and he's not breaking it. He's sticking with it. He's got his substitutions, which you gotta like when he brings in Glasgow and Haile Selassie. That's a lot of speed to be facing late into the game. It's very difficult to get your legs together against somebody just coming off the bench. And guess what? They're professional players too. So hands off to Berhalter. I mean, he has changed this squad tremendously. I believe we're in ninth place right now. And who would believe that Philadelphia is in first place? And basically, they're a homegrown squad. Like Berhalter's moving right now. He had 5 U.S. or local players out on the field, which I loved. When I looked at the schedule last week, Nick, we have 3 road games, and I thought, oh, brother, this is going to be a difficult stretch. But, if we came back with, say, 5 or 6 points, I would have been happy as punch. But now we've got 3, and I think we've got another win in us. We're going to New England this week, and I think we can beat New England. If that center midfielder gets hot, it makes it quite difficult. But, the Fire we haven't seen this kind of play from a Chicago Fire soccer team in 15, 16 years. I mean, I can't remember when we had a lot of homegrown players out there and we're developing soccer in the city of Chicago. It has not been that situation. I'm just pleased as punch, as the old expression goes. Who was the most valuable player on the Fire team for this game? I know Gutierrez scored a lot of goals, but that Kuipers up front is annoying. He should have had a goal. He had a couple of really great shots, but the way he and who's ever on his side close down the field for passing is wonderful. One last thing, Nick. Playing out of the back, there's so many teams that are doing it right now. I would like to see a combination of both, but I can't say anything bad about Berhalter after what we've had here for years. I hope and pray that Terran can get his game back. I'm not sure whether he can do it for this year. Rogers, getting that early yellow card, him and Pineda, if I was Berhalter, I would have pulled one of them. I'm scared to death of going down a man early in a game like the Rogers thing. I don't think that was a red card. Maybe a yellow, but not a red. Well, he got a yellow, but another yellow would have been disastrous for the Fire. But we will wait till next year, next game. Take care, Mike, Nick. Have a good day.
John, thanks so much again for the analysis and the commentary there. Love everything that you're saying. And yeah, we will see what the Fire bring in the next match. Looking ahead, the Fire have a U.S. Open Cup round of 16 matchup at New England tonight, May 20th. Then over the weekend, they have a match on the 25th at New York City, an afternoon match, 2 p.m. And then to close the month of May out, they are at Orlando City on May 31st, 6:30 p.m. Central kickoff there. So really what is one of the more tougher parts of the Chicago Fire schedule, by virtue of away games, by virtue of congestion, they are actually turning it into one of their more successful parts of the schedule. So they had a very good March. Yeah, February, the opener against Columbus, 4-2 loss, whatever. I'm not going to worry about an opening day loss to defending champs. However, you're going to look at the month of March, 3 wins and 2 draws. That's pretty good. You're going to look at April, 3 losses and a draw. That draw coming against Miami, decent result, I guess, but then that 7-2 Nashville drubbing. And what did we talk about after that match? How will the Fire respond? Now in May, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 Results: 3 wins and a draw. Yes, one of those wins is against Detroit City of the USL Championship, but still the Fire had to go out and execute, and they did it for nothing. Now they get to take on the Revolution. So looking ahead at the Revolution, just really quickly for tonight's match, the Revs are coming in decent form. Their last match was a 0-0 draw to New England on the 17th. Prior to that, a 3-3 draw. Wow, I can't talk right now. I'm looking at this weird schedule here. So, New England's last match on May 17th, a 0-0 draw to San Jose. Previously, a 3-3 draw at Orlando City. Their last U.S. Open Cup match was a 2-1 victory over Rhode Island. And so now they are facing the Chicago Fire in the round of 16. I love the old school potential rivalry to be rebuilt here by these teams meeting each other in a cup match. And I'm confident that the Fire are going to create a lot of opportunities tonight and hopefully come away with a big 3 points. Not even 3 points. It's a tournament game. It's a win. Let's go Fire. Let's get on to that round of 8. Real quick, check out the standings in the Eastern Conference. You got Philadelphia and Cincinnati at the top of the table on 29 points. Columbus and Nashville round out the top 4 on 27 and 24 points. Chicago Fire sitting at 9th on 19 points. Charlotte owns the tiebreaker because they have one more win than the Fire. Both teams have an even goal differential. Charlotte 21 for and against, the Fire 24 and against. But as we know in MLS, first tiebreaker is the win. And then bottom of the East, rounding it out, Toronto, Atlanta, and Montreal on 13, 11, and 7 points, respectively. Quickly out west, our top 4 teams, Vancouver on 28 points, followed by Minnesota, San Diego, and Portland, 25, 24, and 23 points. I would have never been able to pick these 4 as the top 4 in the West at any point in the season, ever predicting it. What a great season for the Caps, for the Loons, and Portland with a bit of a resurgence here. You've got San Jose and Austin currently sitting in that play-in game spot, 18 points each. And at the bottom of the Western Conference, Kansas City on 12 points, St. Louis on 11, and the Galaxy on 4. So with that, we're going to go ahead and close out our show. Thanks for sticking with me. My hour return special here on Feed the Fire. Please like, subscribe, rate, review, share the show, grow the show. Look for me at the home games in section 205 or wandering around tailgates, cracking a beer, hanging out with friends and family. And as always, let's go Fire.